You're listening to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses. Each week, you'll hear my thought-provoking conversations with Olympians, pro athletes, CEOs, elite coaches, best-selling authors, and other high performers to uncover their secrets to success. Get ready to be inspired each week when we talk about leadership, teamwork, work ethic, and more. Are you ready? Let's go. Hi, Michael, and welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp. My guest, everybody who's tuning in, is Michael Hess, Vice President at Westpac Wealth Partners. Michael, welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. Glad to be here.
I am glad to have you here, Michael. As you and I have talked about, I am on this journey talking to high performers in all walks of life. Olympians, professional athletes, CEOs, entrepreneurs, nonprofit founders, you name it, people who are doing really interesting things like yourself. But I want to talk to you today about a number of different things. But one of them in particular, Michael, is financial wellness, financial literacy, holistic financial health, which I know is something that you're super passionate about. One common thread, Michael, in all the conversations I've had with super successful people is that generally people that find success have a game plan. Yet one of the things I know from talking to you and talking to others is that financial plans are not always necessarily as high of a priority for people as they should be. Why do people just necessarily put the financial planning and the financial wellness when they think about their life and lifestyle sometimes to the back burner?
That's a great question. I think a big majority of people, they think they can do it themselves, number one. Number two is that as a whole, we are spenders, right? We're not necessarily savers like previous generations were. You know, you go back maybe 2 generations, if not one, and they grew up in the Depression. And so, you know, any kind of debt was just completely off limits to them. Whereas nowadays, people have their credit cards, their debit cards, you know, they just spend, and they don't create this plan or any kind of plan to protect them. They rely on trying to get investment returns, you know, rates of return, which obviously you can't control, right? And so from my experience, the best thing that you can do is save, right? Because saving, you can control. You can control how much you save, right? And every day we come across spending decisions that we lose most of the time, right? Should I go get that Starbucks coffee? Okay, I'll get that. There goes $5, $7, whatever the Starbucks coffee costs, right? But if you just said to yourself, I don't need that coffee today, right? And it's a split-second decision that's made subconsciously that we just now, there goes $7, right? We can make our coffee at home. We can not have a coffee, right? Or do it every other day, whatever it is. Just saving something is better than spending it on something that you don't really need.
Michael, it's so interesting there. And it seems to me like one of the things that we study a lot on this show is the kind of these micro habits, right? The fact that small decisions, you know, lead to big results. But it's not only small decisions can lead to good results and bad results. I think your example there about the Starbucks, the $5, $6, $7, when it compounds and you think about how much you spend at Starbucks every month or every year, and all the purchases that's on an individual basis seem like they're not going to break the bank for you, compound. I'm wondering, you're involved in so much, Michael. You're the co-founder of Gotta Make Lemonade, which we'll talk about, a new ultra marathon runner, which I want to get into. But you've been in the financial services industry, the financial wellness, financial advisory business for 25 plus years now. This is interesting. You call yourself the quarterback to your client's personal economy. I know you played college sports, but talk about how do you land at quarterback?
So because I'm a sports guy, right? And sports analogies just make sense to me. And so if we go into that domain for a minute, right? If you think about, let's take the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? If they, in the week leading up to the Super Bowl, in their practice time, or the 2 weeks, right? In their practice time, if Tom Brady only met with his quarterback's coach, and Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette only met with the running back coach, and Mike Evans and Godwin and Gronk, and like they only met with their positions coach, and the offensive line only met with their position coach, and they went into the Super Bowl and they tried to play a game, to play the game, the Chiefs would have blown them out because there would be no coordination whatsoever to a game plan. And that's how people take their financial lives. That's how they handle their financial lives, right? As we get into the workplace, right? We graduate from college, we start to make a little bit of money. We maybe find somebody to help us handle investments, and we pick up, a CPA, right? And those people are just probably referrals or a friend of a friend, or maybe one of your college buddies started at one of the wirehouses, right? And they're like, "Hey, man, I'm a stockbroker now, and I can help you. Give me your money that you're making, right?" And you start a 401k, and then you get married, and you get some insurance, and you have to have a will and a trust and all those things. But none of those people actually ever speak to each other, right? So now here you are, you've evolved as a person, as a family man, as a husband, as a father, a mother, or wife, and you're getting all this disconnected advice that comes in a vacuum, right? Now, these financial professionals, they're all most likely, hopefully, well-intentioned and well-schooled and all of that. But at the end of the day, that leaves it's like a financial junk drawer, right? You have all this information, and you know where it is, you just don't know how it gets together. And that's what I do as a wealth manager is I become that quarterback, right? I put it all together. I'm at the line of scrimmage, surveying the defense, seeing where our opportunities are, seeing where our weaknesses are, and calling the best play possible under the circumstances, right? So once we get the lay of the land, right, we can know, do we audible to a run? Do we hit a pass, right? So that's where that all comes up with, and hopefully that resonates and makes sense to you.
It does. I love the analogy. On this show, we're all about analogies. I tell people, that obviously this show is called Everybody Pulls the Tarp, but this show is not about baseball. Everybody Pulls the Tarp is really a mindset and a philosophy about that I have about how you should live your life, about how you should work, that there's no task beneath you. There's no task above you. Everybody needs to communicate, and everybody has responsibility to do what's most important for their team, their community. In terms of quarterback of your client's personal economy, it sounds to me like what you're talking about there is really, everything comes down to communication. Talk about that for a minute. It seems like, I kept kind of hearing threads there that seem like a lot of it boils down to communication.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you think about an economy as a whole, whether it's the United States economy or Los Angeles County or, whatever, little things that you do on one part of the economy, they have an effect on the other part, right? So going back to our Starbucks example, spending that money on Starbucks has an impact on our savings, right? And so we have to be able to communicate on a macro level here, right? If let's just take, for example, property and casualty insurance, okay? If your protection on your property and casualty insurance is out of line, meaning let's just say you're protecting too much. You have too much insurance, right? Which doesn't often happen or ever really, but the premiums that you're paying may not be in line, right? Or maybe your deductible is too low, so your premiums are high. Well, that helps the property and casualty insurance person, because the higher the premium is, then the more their commission they're making, right? And as we talked about earlier, hopefully they're well-intentioned people. Some of them are, some of them aren't, right? So maybe they sold you deductibles that are too low, so they make that, so there's a higher premium. That's something that we'll look at. And I don't do property and casualty insurance, but I want to look at that because I want to make sure that you're not just, writing a check for something that is exorbitant, right? So it's similar, with your tax returns, right? Most CPAs, I'm not a CPA, most CPAs though, they're compliance people. So at the end of the year, right, you just give them all of your information and they tell you what you have to pay, right? It's like when you go to the grocery store, you go to the checkout line, and are you really paying attention if the person swipes your item twice instead of just the once, or three times instead of two items, right? You're not. You get the bill, you pay the bill. That's similar to how most CPAs work, right? There's no planning involved. So we want to dig into tax returns. We want to dig into your property and casualty insurance premiums and deductibles. We want to dig in to make sure that your wills and your trusts are set up properly. And then, of course, we want to look at your cash flow, right? We want to make sure that your cash flow is ending up somewhere on your balance sheet in a positive way that's going to help you get to your retirement and allow you to achieve that retirement that you do envision for yourself. But you're right. It all comes down to the communication between, those different facets of your economy.
Why, Michael, do people, it seems like, yeah, I'm sure, yeah, there are plenty of people who focus on this stuff and it's at the top of their list, but it seems like something that people shy away from, especially earlier, in your career, when maybe you're first getting married, you might be starting a family. Why is it something that people just shy away from?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. I think as far as the planning, you mean?
Well, just in general, thinking about, I know you talk all the time about the holistic financial wellness, right? Like thinking about, people focus on their diet, they focus on their exercise, they focus, there's a lot of focus. We've got Mental Health Awareness Month coming up, right? There's a lot of focus on a lot of different aspects of our wellness, but financial wellness, financial security, not just wealth creation, but that security. It seems like it's not at the forefront of everybody's mind. Why do you think that is?
I think it's people don't know what they don't know is partly what it is. But I also think people believe that either, like I said earlier, they can do it themselves because there's so much information now on the internet, right? About you can research any stock that you want, any bond that you want, crypto now, obviously, right? There's so much information that for whatever reason, people think they can do it themselves. But like there's plenty of information about medical stuff too, right? But I'm not going to diagnose if I have, heart disease or something like that just because I can look it up, right? I'm going to go to a professional. So partly I think it's because of that. The other aspect I believe that plays into it is that they think like, okay, I got somebody watching my investment. I'm good, right? Or in addition to that, I have term insurance. I'm good. My family's protected, right? And those might not be the appropriate coverages. They might not be the appropriate investments. I have a 401k plan. That might be something that we would want to look at because possibly that's not the best use of your money, right? Especially, this is like one of my pet peeves as far as young people when they first get into the workforce, and even for, older as well, but definitely for younger people, when they get into the workforce, the first thing that HR tells them or their parents tell them or somebody in their firm tells them is the best way you can save for retirement is put money into your 401k. Max out your 401k. Well, I'm 25 years old. I can't touch that money till I'm 59 and a half, right? That's completely illiquid now to me without a penalty in certain circumstances, right? Why am I going to do that? And by the way, I don't know what the tax situation is going to be at the time I'm retired.
Of that age.
To take that money out. And furthermore, at 25 years old, I'm probably not at my maximum earning capacity. So that tax deduction that I'm getting, it may be a reverse tax bomb that I'm setting up because when I retire, I might be pulling my income out of my 401k plan at a higher rate, right? So those are things that philosophically I don't agree with traditional financial planning about,
It's very interesting. And Michael, I you and I have talked about this. I can see it as we look at it. You're passionate about this. And not only is this your profession, but this is somewhat personal for you. I know you've talked about, pretty publicly about your wife's breast cancer diagnosis back in 2014 and how if you hadn't done some things to put yourself in a well-prepared position from a financial health standpoint and a planning perspective, that situation, could have turned out a lot differently. Talk about that for a minute, because I'd imagine when it becomes personal, it cements it for you.
Oh yeah, for sure. So yeah, here we are chugging along. This is 2014. Both of our daughters were born. At the time, my older one was about 7 and my younger one was about 3. And thankfully, the breast cancer diagnosis came out of the blue. My wife had gotten her first mammogram just before turning 40, came back negative. But then literally 11 days after that mammogram, we could see a lump in her right breast. And she says, "Can you see it?" "Yeah, I can see it." So she goes to the general practitioner, and he's like, "It's nothing. Let's just keep an eye on it." Goes to the OB. She says the same thing. "It's nothing. Let's keep an eye on it." So this was around November. So holidays come and go. And I won't, get into the whole story. But anyway, turns out it was breast cancer, and she had to make a choice of what to do. And she chose a double mastectomy, even though it was only in one side. But the financial planning aspect of it was that thankfully, number one, we had been saving way more than we were spending. She had been doing really, really well in her career. I was doing all right in my career, but I had enough knowledge. We put money away for that rainy day because protection first, right? The philosophy that I have is protection first, foremost, and forever, right? And so we had also gotten our life insurance in order because God forbid, if something really would have happened, here we are about almost coming up on 2014, almost in May. So coming up here in about a month, we're on our 7-year anniversary of her surgery, or we'll be on her 7. And so we had when we got together, she was about 27, I was 31, and we were just dating. But, I had the wherewithal and the information to say, you know what, we are the healthiest we are going to be right now. We knew we were going to be moving forward and everything. We got life insurance right then and there. It's the lowest cost it's going to be at, as opposed to waiting, right? Since we knew we were eventually going to get it anyway. And we could always bump up the coverage as we went. So, we had taken care of that piece of the puzzle way, way early. And thankfully, we didn't have to I didn't need it on her, to pay off. But in case it would have, it would have been in place.
I can only imagine, what that period of time in your life is like with the two young girls. I'm a dad. My wife and I, we have two young girls. I can't possibly imagine, but I do know from your story, maintaining a positive outlook and perspective through that, if you put the financial planning piece aside, which you had anchored down, but your ability to stay positive, your ability to take the perspective out of that situation, as the story goes, I want to hear you share it, but essentially you looked at your wife at one point and said, no matter how difficult the situation is, we got to make lemonade. And that spawned a foundation now that you guys are doing, fantastic work on. Talk about that for a minute, because that is pulling the tarp, right? That's what we talk about in the show, these little moments that you go outside the bounds of what's expected.
Yeah, no. And I love your story as well. You shared with me, and you share on your podcast all the time. It's just something that what happened was, so my wife she was the host of Dancing with the Stars, and she was on Entertainment Tonight and a few different Hollywood, gossip shows. And she made her announcement on Good Morning America that she had breast cancer. And we got such an outpouring of support from the public and, people that we didn't know, hang in there, you can get past this, all these like great positive messages. There were some people that were just haters, like, oh, it'll be easy for you. You have money and, whatever, you can't fight that. Right. But as she was in bed recovering one day, I just looked at her and, thinking about all the positivity that was coming our way. I said, we have to pay this forward, and we got to make lemonade out of this. She looked at me. She was like, what are you up to? Because a lot of times I come up with big ideas, and it's like, I like to call it, I make the snowball, and then I hand it off to her and have her throw it. So she takes off with what my idea is, and I'm the big picture guy. And so we started a website called gottamakeLemonade.com. And it's a place to inspire positivity in the face of adversity. We've had people share their stories of how they turn lemons into lemonade, from whether it's career, injury, relationships, and things of that nature. And it's not a foundation, right? It's just, we just have the website.
A community, essentially.
Yeah. And we had some apparel that we had online that people could buy, and we were donating, half of the proceeds for that. But we have probably about 40 stories, 45 stories maybe, that are up there, from some crazy ones, man. Like, somebody shared a story about how she was sexually trafficked, and how she was able to get out of that. We have another guy who has overcome brain trauma. He was managing these MMA fighters, and one day he decided to get in the ring with them and spar, and the guy choked him out, and he had a stroke. And
wow.
He was in the hospital for, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, something like that, having to relearn how to use his body, how to speak. To this day, the left side of his body still, isn't all there. During that time, his wife divorced him. She couldn't handle it. They had 2 daughters as well. And, it's just horrible. But he now is on the other side. He's I think his website is Stroke Hacker. He's just a phenomenal guy. Sean Enton, just phenomenal.
Was this like positive outlook that you were able to bring to the family during this crisis? Was this something that, or have you always just been a positive person? Was Was this just somewhat natural for you, or did you have to kind of learn how to be positive and supportive? Because at that point, your family's your team. I mean, that's it. It's the number one team.
That's a really, really good question. I think, Andrew, it was really out of fear. I was scared to death that I was going to lose her, have a 7 and a 3-year-old daughter to bring up by myself. I don't know the first thing about girls, right? I was, like always chasing girls, right? Chasing girls, playing sports. That was my two hobbies, right? Growing up as a kid, playing college basketball, like that was what I did, right? I knew nothing about, what they go through, right? And so here I am with the specter of, God forbid, losing my best friend and losing the mother of my 2 daughters. I think it was just out of fear that it came up. I'm generally pretty easygoing, but I think the positivity really actually kind of came out of fear, to be honest.
It's interesting. Fear. I haven't heard that before, right? I mean, one of the things, I'll never forget a conversation we had on this show a couple months ago with Eric LeGrand. Now, Eric LeGrand, if you remember his story, Eric is, he was the Rutgers football player, star for Rutgers at the time, became paralyzed from the neck down. Doctor said he would never walk again. Doctor said he would never eat on his own, never breathe on his, or never eat without a feeding tube, never breathe on his own. He's eating on his own. He's breathing on his own, and he says he's going to walk again. It's just a matter of when is his outlook. But he said that one of the most important things for him was maintaining perspective. So no matter how dire his situation was, he would look around the floor, the rehabilitation facility that he was on when he was trying to start his recovery. And he would see all kinds of situations. He'd see someone pass away. He'd see someone whose spouse divorced them, stopped coming to visit them. A girlfriend breaks up with them, stops coming to visit them. And he would say to himself, what right do I have to complain? I mean, my situation, he said to me, Andrew, my situation may suck, but what right do I have to complain? I think perspective is so important too, but to think about, how the role fear played, right? And how honest and vulnerable you were with the fact that, hey, I could have a challenge here ahead of me. Very, very interesting how the fear kind of spurs the positive front.
Yeah, no. And I think, Eric's perspective is similar to mine as well. I mean, we kind of got the best of the worst, meaning that my wife didn't have to have chemo. She didn't have to have radiation. So we didn't have to have all of that extra baggage, I guess, going through the recovery process. She was bedridden for, I don't remember, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, something like that, where, that was tough because my 3-year-old, my younger, well, she's 10 now, but when she was 3 and even now, she's just one of those really energetic kids. And, she couldn't jump on the bed with mommy and hug mommy, like, aggressively hug mommy and everything. And so we had to really try and keep her calm. And so that was a little difficult. My older one, she's just the most docile, like just, amazing kid. Not that my little one's not amazing too, but from a personality standpoint, they're just so different and they bring so much to the tables. But, it was pretty funny.
Michael, before we wrap up in a couple of minutes, we got to get into your new passion for kind of marathon running and all kinds of ultra sports, endurance sports. So in January of 2017, to continue this kind of pay it forward mindset, tarp puller like you are, Michael, you decide to essentially run a 50-mile ultra marathon and raise a bunch of money for Feeding America along the way. But not only did you do it, you kind of brought your wife and kids along for part of the journey. They didn't quite do 50 miles, but they did a lot as well. So what made you decide to get involved in that?
Yeah, that was cool, man. That was really cool. So one of my good friends from growing up, Jesse Itzler, he wrote a book called Living with a SEAL. It was his first book that he had written. Amazing book, hysterical book, a lot of great takeaways as well. And in the book, he talks about a time when he ran a 100-mile race. And knowing him since probably second grade, I thought to myself, not yet. So I read the book in like 2 hours. This was Thanksgiving of 2015. And the next morning I woke up and I was on the treadmill. And I had been completely sedentary outside of playing golf for many, many years. Once I probably turned about 36 or so, I was like, I've been an athlete my entire life. I've always worked out. I'm just done. And my wife, crazy worker outer person, and fitness person. And she was always trying to get me to work out. So I read the book on the treadmill the next morning. She looks at me like I'm crazy. So flash forward to 2016, I start doing a little running challenge with one of my coworkers. And we were just, setting to run 15 miles a week. It wasn't like a huge, really big, crazy goal. But, when you're working and juggling family and all that, trying to get that all in is sometimes a challenge. And cut to, I started to get my endurance up, and I started to think like, well, Jesse ran 100 miles in a day. I've known him since I'm a kid. I could do 50. And so I found a 20-week training schedule online. I compressed it to 11 weeks, and I just picked a day and a place right near my house to go run it. There was nobody running with me. It wasn't an organized run or anything like that. And I have a great video the night before the run, my family, like giving me encouragement to get it done and everything, and challenging other people to get out and run. And it's on my Facebook, but it's cute. So that day I did the 50 miles. It took me 10 hours, but over the course of the 10 hours, my daughters were only 5 and 8. The 5-year-old did 8 miles. The 8-year-old did 9 miles. And my wife had done 18 miles. By the end of the day, she did 18 miles. We raised $25,000 for Feeding America. And it was just really, really cool, man. It was obviously super difficult, but it was cool.
I'm amazed, right? I mean, but let's just talk about the simple math there, right? I mean, it's like, hey, my childhood friend runs 100 miles. I could do half. I mean, I got to. I mean, you're so goal oriented, Michael. But I love the simple math there. That is
one thing I left out that I didn't know at the time was that Jesse had already run 17 New York City marathons, and the longest I had ever run prior to the training was like 6 miles, maybe. I didn't know that. Had I known that, I might not have tried it, but.
Well, what's interesting, right? I mean, it's and again, this is why I wanted to dig into your life and career a little bit more, Michael. Like we have the last 30 minutes, because you're so goal oriented. You set these ambitious goals for yourself, and then you kind of influence others with that energy and positivity, which is so cool. But I would imagine, just thinking about your kids, right? They're 5 and 8 at the time. I mean, how cool is it to see their parent set a really lofty goal, and then have their parent kind of set a lofty goal for them? So that at an early age, you kind of ingrain in them that anything is really possible. Very, very cool.
That's the hope, right? During the training is when I felt like it probably, really impacted them the most, because the weekend training runs were brutal. There was the way they had me do it what I found was the long runs were both Saturday and Sunday. And so I'd get up, Saturday morning, 7, 6:30, whatever, and I'd go out for 3 hours and run. And I'd come back, they'd still be on the couch watching their cartoons or whatever. I would give them a bunch of crap. You guys are lazy. What are you doing? I'm out here. I'm an old man and I'm running and, getting my exercise and everything. And then, we talked all about that, set goals that are just ridiculously difficult to do. Work your butt off and don't give up. And if you come up short, if you can look yourself in the mirror knowing that you've given everything possible to achieve that crazy goal that you set, even if you come up short, that's okay.
Michael, we're going to end right there. That is advice that we can all take to inspire us to pull the tarp a little bit more today, tomorrow, and into the future. Michael, this has been so much fun. I hope we do this again sometime. Thanks so much for spending a little bit of time with Everybody Pulls the Tarp this week.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Instagram at AndrewMoses123 and sign up for my monthly email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today is a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.